Hey everyone, and welcome to Live Free Legal. I am Tiffany Lesnik, domestic violence attorney, survivor, and founder of Live Free Legal. We have a special live legal Q&A in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month today, and I have two special guests with me, both amazing attorneys. So you get access to three attorneys today. We're spotlighting resources that empower survivors to stand strong both in and out of court. Today, we're talking about one of the hardest parts of escaping abuse, getting legal help when you can't afford it. Whether you're navigating custody, divorce, or a domestic violence protective order, this conversation is for you. So stay with us. Joining me are two powerhouse attorneys dedicated to access to justice for victims of domestic violence. I have Elysia Prendergast. She's the managing attorney for the Raleigh Office of Legal Aid in North Carolina. And I'm going to let her introduce herself in a minute. And I also have Richard Wagaman. He is the director of the Family Law Pro Bono Clinic at Campbell University School of Law and the Dean of Experiential Learning. Before we get started today, I want to send out a reminder that today is Wear Purple Day in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I've got my purple on. I see that both of my guests have their purple on today. Just make sure if you don't have your purple on that you get your purple on today. We are giving away 2 free Empower Her memberships. If you share this video with someone who needs it, give us a thumbs up and put a hashtag Live Free Legal in your post to be entered to win one of those memberships. So, all right, let's get started. Get your questions ready. So, Elysia and Richard, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to go ahead and start out by having y'all introduce yourselves. So, Elysia, let's start with you. Could you just give us a little introduction, who you are and what you do with legal aid?
Sure. I'm Elysia Prendergast Jones. I am the managing attorney at Legal Aid's Raleigh office here. So I handle family law and domestic violence cases myself, and I oversee all of the cases that our office handles.
Okay. And what types of cases do you work on?
So for me, I work on domestic violence, custody, divorce, and that's pretty much the cases that I work on. But our office does evictions. That helps as well with survivors of domestic violence because a lot of times they face those issues. We work on consumer cases, unemployment, Social Security disability cases. So it's a variety of cases that our office handles.
Okay, great. And Richard, what about you? Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Wagaman. I am on the faculty at Campbell University at the School of Law in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am the director of the Gaylor Family Law Litigation Clinic, which is a pro bono legal clinic providing family law representation to individuals who cannot afford attorneys through practical training of law students. And then I oversee the other clinics in the law school as well, which provide assistance with things like evictions, things like school disability determinations for children who have IEPs, and a couple other clinics as well.
Okay, that's awesome. And so many women watching tell me, I want to leave, but I can't afford a lawyer. So let's start there. Richard, can you tell us, how does the Campbell Family Law Pro Bono Clinic work?
Yes, so we provide full representation, everything from the initial consultation to client interaction, client meeting, negotiations with a victim's abuser, litigation, and going to court and providing representation in court during the hearings for those clients. The way that a individual becomes a client is by reaching out, contacting the clinic, either through our website or by phone or email. And assuming they are eligible for representation and there's something we can do to help them with their family law case, they work in concert with a law student under the supervision of a licensed attorney to prepare the case, get everything ready to go, and then move forward with the litigation process to resolve and address their rights and claims.
And so how do you qualify to receive services at the clinic?
So for our clinic, we deal with family law cases, so child custody, domestic violence, child support, spousal support, equitable distribution are the main areas that we handle. And our eligibility is based on income levels. So it's a component of how many children you have and what the size of your family is, in correlation with your monthly income, not your spouse's income, but your individual income. And then based on those qualifications, we can open up and start a file and proceed with moving the cases forward.
Okay. And so this is if you are like the dependent spouse, or your ex, an abusive ex, is the one who has all of the money or has seized all of the money, they would not qualify for legal services with the clinic. Is that correct?
The spouse, the abusive spouse in that circumstance, the supporting spouse would not. The dependent spouse who, doesn't have access to the funds, isn't the one employed, whether they're a stay-at-home parent, a homemaker, or just they've recently lost their job, or they have a low-paying job, they would be eligible for services.
Okay. And how can survivors apply?
The easiest way is to contact us by phone. The main number for the clinic is 919-865-4676. And then by contacting us, we can get the screening and file process started.
Okay, that's awesome. And what do you think the biggest misconception people have about pro bono or law school clinics?
The biggest misconception I would initially say is I actually think people aren't aware that resource is available. Campbell has several. We have 7 clinics right now that do a variety of services, but lots of law schools are beginning to open up clinics across the country and across the world, as the method of legal education changes to a more practical, experiential-based program. So the biggest misconception is just the awareness that these programs exist. And then beyond that, I think it's the hesitation to work with a law student. But the thing that I would say to any client thinking about that and concerned about that is you are getting legal representation. All of the law students have been trained, they've been taught, and they are all supervised by licensed attorneys. So even if you are predominantly working with a law student, that's all done under the auspices and care of a licensed practicing attorney.
Okay, that's great. And how much zeal do your students have for practicing law?
They are very excited, very motivated, quite nervous, but they are very excited and very passionate about the work that they're doing because the clinical programs are all elective based. So you really only get students who are really truly called into this field, who are willing to sign up and do the work that is required to complete a clinic course.
That's great. That's awesome. And hi, Ma, I see you on there. She asked, are there any services like this available in Johnston County?
So we do a little bit of work in Johnston County. Most of our work is based in Wake, but we do come into some of the satellite counties under necessary circumstances.
And I will say our office serves Wake and Johnston.
Okay, that's great to know. And then how do your students, Richard, learn how to handle trauma-informed cases? Or how do you incorporate issues of abuse and domestic violence when you're training or teaching your students?
So all of the students who are working on cases, are going through classes as well, and they're being taught trauma-informed counseling. They're being taught how to effectively work with clients who are going through trauma themselves to avoid re-victimization, that there's a constant and evolving education that's going on for these students as they're getting their hands on these cases for the first time.
Okay, that's awesome. And then are you the only clinic that's available, or are there clinics in law schools across the United States?
There are clinics and law schools across the state, across the country, and internationally. As the pedagogy for law school education kind of changes, clinical and experiential education is kind of becoming one of the newest models and is really rapidly expanding across the country.
Okay, that's awesome. If someone is outside of North Carolina and they're outside of Raleigh, where the law school that you work at is located, what do they look for when searching for a similar clinic?
The easiest way to do it is probably to start by searching for law schools that are close to the individual's location. Almost all of the legal pro bono clinics are going to be run through and associated with law schools. So finding the law school that's closest to you, most law schools have a pretty publicized clinical program if they have one, so they're pretty easy to find the information. I know Campbell's in particular are very much out there and alert to how you can find these programs. But beyond and addition to that is just calling the main information line for the law schools. I know Campbell at our just front desk gets a lot of calls, and they all get routed to the appropriate clinic and the appropriate program that are needed.
Right. So, and I think it's important to understand, ladies out there, that these services at the law schools, the clinics, are absolutely 100% free. Right. I mean, there's an investment of time and there's an investment of emotionality, right? It's still difficult going through the legal process. But as far as your financial resources are concerned, these are free services that you do not have to pay for. So it's an invaluable asset. Richard, how are these programs funded?
Each school has differing models. Campbell's is all privately funded, so it all relies on fundraising and donations from community partners, from individual donors. So all of our funding and all of our resources do come from private individuals, which means that we're able to do the representation of these clients at no charge for the legal representation. There may be nominal fees for certain parts of the process if we have to obtain records of some type. But as far as the representation itself, that is done completely at no cost because of the work and the funding of the private donors who allow these clinics to operate.
Okay, that's great. So if you have a heart for helping victims of domestic violence and you want to see more women and children be able to receive services for domestic violence, for custody, reach out to these clinics, help support these clinics. They need your financial resources, as does legal aid, right? These are services that definitely need funding for folks that have the ability to support these programs. They're not self-sustaining, and they can't exist without our support. So if you do have the ability to support these programs, I would encourage you to reach out in your area to help with that type of support. So Elysia, I want to talk to you as well. So legal aid is often the first place survivors turn. Can you walk us through how someone gets started and what they should expect when applying for services with legal aid?
Sure. So there's several ways that they can get in touch with us. They can get in touch with us by going through one of the domestic violence agencies who, if they do a legal aid referral, will send their information straight to us, where we will contact them and then start their case. They can meet with an attorney. They would probably meet with the paralegal first that would open their file, then meet with an attorney. All of our attorneys are specialized in this area. They are all supervised also by a supervising attorney and then me as a managing attorney. So they are there to help with everything. We also have a hotline that people can call, and they can be anywhere in the state. So that's 866-219-5262. So they can talk to someone on that hotline, and then that hotline will connect them to one of our local offices that would be able to help them. So what we do is we may talk to them about their complaint if they've already filed a domestic violence protective order. If not, we can walk them through how to file a domestic violence protective order. If there's things on that domestic violence protective orders that need to be changed, we can help them amend that. And then we walk with them through the court process. So we explain to them what it's about, it's going to look like, and then we attend court with them. We represent them in court. At times, there are times where we can only give advice because of our limited resources, but we try our best to represent as many people as we can. Last year, the cases opened in our office combined with everything we do was about 1,300 cases. And about 70% of those cases were domestic violence or family law cases.
Wow. Yeah. And so what are the most common legal needs that you see among survivors?
So that's a great question. One of the things that we see are the need for legal representation in court when going back after the 10-day hearing or for the 10-day hearing for that permanent domestic violence protective order. Then there's a second component of the custody. There are so many times that survivor has children and need to get custody. We can help at certain levels, just as Richard said. For our custody cases, we have income requirements, but for our domestic violence cases, there are no income requirements and all of our services are free. The next thing that I see are the need for financials. So we help limitedly with financials, but we do try to get that up front in a domestic violence protective order when we can.
Okay. And does the Raleigh Office of Legal Aid, do you all help in custody cases?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I do a good bit of. It's one of my favorite things to do, our custody cases, but we can only do that limited. So they have to qualify financially, which is the same like qualifications as Richard explained for their clinics. And then once they do, they have to have some kind of connection to what our grants would allow us to do, because we're totally grant or private funded. So it has to fall within those guidelines.
And do different legal aid offices, so different counties and different states, do they handle different matters?
That's correct. So, for instance, in New York, their legal aid society handles they handle criminal cases as well as civil cases. Here, we only handle civil cases, and there's the public defenders that handle the criminal cases. So it varies of what they do in different states, and different organizations are set up differently. So they have some states have legal societies or some have legal aids, and they're all set up a little bit different.
Okay. So depending on what county you live in or what state you might live in, your legal aid might offer more services or fewer services, just depending on where you live, okay, and what resources are available. What can women do while waiting for representation? So they've completed their application, they're waiting to find out whether they're going to be assigned an attorney, and so they're just in that waiting period. What can they do while they're in that waiting period to prepare themselves?
So they can try to collect the evidence, such as medical records, police records if they have it. That's something that we can also do, but collecting as much as they can, pictures of any incidents, doing maybe a timeline of things that help. So whatever they can do to help move their case forward. So when they do talk to an attorney, they have all of that prepared, and then we can prepare to represent them or even help them how to represent themselves.
Okay, that's a great tip. What would you say, Richard, about waiting to receive services through a clinic? Would you say the same thing or something in addition to that?
I would echo everything that Elysia said, but what I would also add is one of the other things that clients can start to gather as much as they have access to is bank and financial records, especially when we start some kind of child support or spousal support case. the biggest component of that is going to be finding out what the finances were. So going to your bank, and you can walk into your bank and they can usually print anywhere from the last 12 to 36 months of statements for you and hand them to you, as long as your name is on the account. Going to your employer and getting your pay stubs. If you don't get physical pay stubs, your HR department would have those and can give them to you. That's going to really speed up the ability for us in the clinic, and I'm sure legal aid as well, to get you into court sooner and to get you, financial compensation, to get you your kids, to get you your court order much quicker.
Yeah, that's great. For those, let's talk about like immigration issues a little bit. So for those that may be undocumented, are you aware of any organizations? Does legal aid help those who are undocumented, or are there other organizations that you would refer women to who are in abusive relationships?
So yes, legal aid, we don't have a requirement that you have to be a U.S. citizen for us to do a domestic violence protective order, nor do we have an income guideline for that. So anyone can apply for our services for domestic violence protective orders. And we also have what's called IMPAV, which is our immigration service. So they're victims of domestic violence or sexual assault can apply for that to help with immigration issues.
Okay, that's awesome. And so if you've ever worked with legal aid or a law school clinic, tell us in the comments what your experience was like and what helped you most. And so for both of our guests, sometimes survivors don't even really know where to start, and they're scared of being turned away or even being re-traumatized by the system. So I think you guys kind of addressed this already, but what are some of the best practical tips for preparing to meet with a free or low cost attorney? Other than gathering documents, right? So we did talk about starting to gather evidence, gathering your financial documents. Do you have any other tips for, what you can do to start preparing to meet with an attorney for the first time?
Two of the things that I will jump in and say is that, having done this kind of work for a long time, that both Tiffany and Elysia can echo, whenever you have to share your story, there's going to be more re-traumatization and some triggering from that. And I think just acknowledging that that's going to happen and being mentally prepared that it's going to be difficult, but knowing that the attorney that you're meeting with, the students you're working with, are trauma informed and kind of handle these with trauma-based care in mind. So it's okay that it may be a struggle and that it's going to be emotional and that it's going to be difficult. We expect that. I tell people in my offices every week, you're not the first person to cry in this room and you won't be the last person to cry in this room. And that's okay. That's part of the process. The other thing that I would kind of suggest is starting to really think about what your end goal is and the specifics of that, because the more concrete you know about what you want, especially as it relates to custody and schedules, because saying you want, some kind of shared model or saying you want some kind of limited model is still a very broad aspect of it. And we understand that a lot of the specifics there's going to be questions about, but giving us some lead into having thought about what you want your future to look like now that you're kind of in control of your own life goes a long way with helping us know how to get you there. Because we can certainly start the journey without knowing where the final destination is, but it helps if we're pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say it's really important to set some goals for yourself. Like, what are your top 3 objectives? They're really important to you so you can stay focused on those goals and not get sidetracked as you go along. Because you have a limited amount of time to achieve those goals. And so we can't go in all different directions. Elysia, did you have anything to add to that?
I agree. Just as Richard said, I do tell people that they can be emotional and let the attorney be strong. I tell them that, we all can't be crying in the courtroom, but they do have to be strong enough to recite their story if needed in front of a judge and be able to handle that. They also have to understand that it's not just us asking questions if we have to go to trial, but it's the other side. So it could either be the abuser or it could be their attorney on there, and you have to be able to stand up to that. Also, you have to aid in your defense of your case, meaning you have to participate. So you have to answer the phone. You have to meet your appointments. You have to gather the evidence that your attorney says, and you have to set realistic goals, because sometimes I know when you are first separated or going through this, everybody wants full custody of the children. And sometimes that's not a realistic goal because our laws don't allow for it at times in certain cases. So understanding that when your attorney says this is the most likely situation because of what our laws say, or understanding that sometimes we need a little bit more to meet the statute guidelines to understand that we're trying to help you.
Right. What can either one of you talk about the state bar referral service? Like, what is it? How can our viewers find it in their states, and how does it help them find affordable legal services?
So the State Bar of North Carolina, there's two different organizations. There's the North Carolina State Bar, which is the governmental organization that oversees and licenses attorneys and is responsible for discipline and the rules of ethics. Then there's a second organization, which is the North Carolina Bar Association, which is a voluntary kind of social community-based organization. The Bar Association has a lawyer referral service that attorneys can agree to sign up for, that they provide low cost or discounted consultations, potentially discounted representation. That's up to each attorney. But it's a way for individuals to find attorneys in their area. And you can contact the Bar Association, their website, which is ncbar.org, O-R-G, has a link to the lawyer referral service, and they provide referrals to every county in the state. They have attorneys who will do reduced cost consultations for anyone who comes through that service.
Right. And so if you can't afford an attorney and you don't qualify for a clinic or legal aid, most states are going to have what we call a bar referral service. So if you go to your state bar, so just Google whatever state you live in, state bar referral service, they are going to have a phone number that you can look up. You can call them, and most of the time they will give you a list of attorneys that will have a consultation with you for a very nominal rate. In our state, it's $50. And so just getting some basic information at the outset can be very, very helpful for you, right? It can put you on the right path, and it can also alleviate some fear, because one of the things abusers will do is they will fill you with lies, right? They're going to tell you things that are not true. That are going to cause you to forfeit legal rights that you have. And so just knowing what the actual legal truth is and meeting with someone can be very helpful to getting you on the right track. So that is a service that is available that many people don't know about, that you can just go meet with someone for $50 and help get you on the right track. Let's talk about like unbundled legal services. Mm-hmm. Elysia, can you talk about like ghostwriting and unbundled? I know that's not what legal aid does, but as an affordable form of legal representation, can you tell folks about what that looks like, what that is?
So we do it on a limited basis.
Okay.
And what it is the state bar allows for attorneys to do parts of a case, which can be cheaper for a client, where they can just write the complaint for you or write the order. So for instance, there aren't any models for emergency custody that are provided by the courts or are provided by clinics usually up front where there are models that they can do on their own. So what you can do is hire an attorney for a low cost just for them to draft that. And for like an emergency order or motion, you have to have both the motion and the order submitted to the court. So those are really great resources. And ghostwriting is, say somebody needed a complaint for custody and they can't afford the legal representation to go forth, but they can afford the nominal fee for the attorney to just draft that paper. And then they're drafting it as if the client drafted it themselves, but they're drafting it with all the legal needs that that client has.
Right, right. And one of the things that I see, y'all can chime in on this, if you're representing yourself, if you file something incorrectly or you draft something incorrectly, the likelihood that your case will get dismissed because it's done improperly or it's done wrong, there's a greater likelihood of that. So just consulting with someone, paying a nominal fee to make sure that those documents get drafted properly can really make a significant impact on your case, especially when it comes to complicated things like alimony or property distribution, when you really don't know how to fill out those forms, right? There might be forms that are required to be filed with the court, and you really don't know how to fill those out properly. So just hiring an attorney on a limited basis to help you complete those forms so they get submitted and your case doesn't get dismissed could make a huge difference for you. You don't necessarily have to retain an attorney, put down a retainer, a deposit, and have that attorney for all time. You can use attorneys periodically.
Correct. And I would say that attorneys will tell you it's more expensive to fix a case than it is to start a case. So for those that need it, I would suggest if they can get help coming up with that cost for that consultation or that ghostwriting will really take them a long way and probably save them a lot of litigation costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Not only the litigation costs, but also the time. We in the clinic just finished up a case that the individual, the victim in that situation, had started the custody case herself, and we got it 6 months down the road because she had so many technical issues that the case kept getting put off and continued, and she kept having to redo things. And we were able to come in, fix those technical issues, and within like 6 weeks, the hearing happened and the custody order got entered that the judge wouldn't have been able to move forward if the technical issue hadn't gotten resolved. Yeah. And that's something that can be a very, very worthwhile investment of limited resources, is to have the technical aspect of it done correctly. Because if you don't, one of the things we kind of explained to the students is if you don't do steps 1, 2, and 3, you cannot do step 4 under the law. It's very procedural. It's very technical in that sense. It's not something that you can kind of skip ahead and jerry rig your way into a good outcome.
Yeah, no, those are excellent points. And I'm going to put in the chat something called advisement services, which is similar to what we're talking about right now, right? You can have an attorney meet with you periodically just to kind of keep you on the right track without having to put a huge retainer down. And there are some attorneys that are willing to do that. So just know that that's a service that's available. What about red flags should survivors watch out for an attorney that offers cheap or fast legal help online?
So it's a bit of a cliche, but I have a colleague who has a sign that says we offer 3 kinds of services: cheap, fast, and good. And you only get 2 of the 3. If you want it cheap and fast, it won't be good. If you want it good and fast, it won't be cheap. And if you want it cheap and good, it won't be fast. And that's kind of if you ever get somebody who's promising you all of the above, there's probably a little bit of salesmanship going on there. The other red flag that I always tell, and would always suggest is if you're ever meeting with an attorney and they tell you and they guarantee you what will happen, they're not being honest with you. I've been doing this for a decade and a half and I've handled a couple thousand cases, and I can't guarantee anything to anyone because I've seen everything happen. The outcome of every case depends on who your judge is and what they had for breakfast that day. And there's no way to guarantee anything. So if you ever have an attorney who tells you this will happen or guarantees something, especially if it's, they're guaranteeing you that you'll get what you want, I'd be extremely hesitant on that and committing a significant amount of money to that, because there's too much salesmanship there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you have to be really careful with attorneys that offer cheap services that do it statewide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you've got to find someone who's offering services that are local to you. I think that tends to be a little bit more legitimate. There are attorneys that offer flat fee services. So if you can find someone that does flat fee, that might be a little more affordable for you versus someone that charges by the hour. So you could look for someone who does flat fee. What I will say about my experience with flat fee services is that in the beginning, they tend to do a lot of work for you and try to get things done. But as your case progresses and it goes on longer and longer and longer, they kind of start to run out of steam. And they invest less and less time in your case. So that's something to be mindful for. You may want to do flat fee per service. You might get more for your investment than just one huge, like a $10,000 flat fee at the beginning for everything, because you might not get what you paid for, towards the end of that time. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Yes, I always say if they're doing a flat fee, do it a structured flat fee, just as you said, so that you're paying for each process in the case. So such as if you're paying for the paperwork that they're doing, and then you're paying for up to maybe 5 appearances in court, especially if you're in Wake County, you never know how many times your case is going to get continued. And that attorney may not want to keep going back. So you want to make sure that they're obligated to go as many times as you're needed, but look at that contract, the way it's set up, so that you can have control over what their services are and making sure that they're doing it too. Another thing, like you said, I just want people to understand that people that do it statewide and don't have attorneys locally need to understand that there's so many local rules that attorneys that just say that they're going to scan the state and not understand it, you may lose your case because they don't understand the local rules, and your case can get dismissed based on a missing of the local rules.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with Richard. Like, it's very important for your lawyer to understand the judges that they're going in front of, and for the judges to have respect for the attorneys that are coming in front of them as well, and not to have someone from 200 miles away who nobody knows.
And just a little very short anecdote on that, to the point Elysia made about how important it is to have somebody who's local as opposed to somebody who's statewide. I was in court last week and saw a case that ended up getting continued, and the woman in that case was not able to have her custody hearing because her attorney thought court started at 10 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock, because that's what it did in the county she was from, and she showed up so late that the judge had already rescheduled the case to a different day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What about, so let's talk about faith-based solutions. So like a pastor or a marriage counselor getting involved in helping draft separation agreements or other types of documents between couples for free. It's a free service. What are y'all's thoughts on that type of legal intervention?
So I say that's a really big red flag, because you don't want somebody that is not a lawyer to start drafting legal documents. And I would be very cautious when it comes to faith-based now attorneys that are not attorneys, but the pastors are someone within that spiritual relationship, because a lot of times what their goal is to try to keep the family together. At least that's what I see with a lot of my clients, and not to see what's best for that survivor.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my big takeaways.
And I would echo off that completely. It also is very potentially illegal for your pastor to do that. There's laws that don't even allow those kind of things. The biggest red flag with it is, and the reason you want an attorney is, if you sign something, you may be under the impression that it's temporary or that it's partial, but you might be accidentally giving up your rights to alimony. You might be giving up your right to retirement accounts without even knowing that you're doing it. And North Carolina has a pretty strong policy that once you sign a contract, you're bound to that contract. And there's not, I wouldn't say, a ton of sympathy for individuals who come in and didn't realize what they did. They generally don't get out of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be, it's I guess one thing to come up with kind of a treatment plan or a counseling plan if you're wanting to go through that. But as Elysia mentioned, understand that, they're not a neutral party and they're not on your side. They are, potentially coming at it with some kind of differing interest. And that needs to be a conversation that's had with the pastor in terms of what their function and what their goal is. And there's a lot of pastors who understand domestic violence, and there's a lot of organizations working with churches to, really bring that aspect of violence to life, and how keeping families together in the midst of violence is not a good thing. And there's a lot of pastors who are understanding that and are very good at it. But figuring out whether the therapist or the pastor that's working with you is trauma informed, and what their motivation is, and whether they're completely in line with what your plans are and what your goals are.
Yeah. And what I would say to that is, your pastor, marriage counselor, therapist, whomever you might be, family therapist who you're working with, they are not lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they do not have specific training on drafting. And so they can potentially set you up for signing something that could have significant financial loss for you. And in North Carolina and in many other states, once you sign a contract, it's non-modifiable and irrevocable. And so you could be signing something, like Richard said, that's permanent, and you could be waiving your rights to property distribution, to alimony. You're not really sure what you're signing. So if you do have a therapist or a pastor draft something for you, please, please, please make sure that you do, the advisement or the unbundled legal services. Go to an attorney and have them review it for you at a minimum before you sign something, to make sure that you are legally protected if you feel like that's the only way. And I understand for victims of domestic abuse, sometimes you feel like that's the only way you can get your abusive spouse to sign something, right? This is a way that he can be influenced by the pastor, or he can be influenced by the marriage counselor. And I know you have to log off here in a minute, Elysia.
Yeah.
So if you need, Elysia has a domestic violence continuing education course that she's teaching this afternoon. And so she's going to have to hop off in order to prepare for that. So we will not see her in a few minutes. I do want to thank you, Elysia, for participating on our panel today. And while we are live now, this will be posted to YouTube, so people can come back and watch it repeatedly over and over again. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your heart for victims and children of domestic abuse, and what you do with through legal aid.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me here. I do appreciate, I don't know if everybody knows, but you've been doing this as an advocate for many, many years. You also volunteered to take cases from us. Richard also volunteers, him and his students, to take cases. So we appreciate the collaboration between the both of you. So thank you.
Absolutely. We have a heart for women going through abuse. Yeah, we have a heart for the oppressed.
Yeah,
You have
it's-
a great afternoon, great rest of your month celebrating Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Thank you. Bye,
See
everyone.
you later.
Bye, everyone.
And so what I was saying is, it might be that he could be influenced by the pastor or the counselor. So sometimes these guys, that's their way of trying to manipulate or triangulate the church or the therapist. And they think, oh, okay, I'm going to look, high and mighty in front of the therapist or the pastor. And so that's a way that you can get some legal recourse. But do please have an attorney look at that document before you sign it. Okay, so that's really important. Let's talk about some pro bono. We have just a little bit of time left. Let's talk about some pro bono resources that are available through the state, like particularly the state bar organizations, like Call for All and free programs that they set up throughout the month or the year that people can participate in. Can you share some of those, Richard?
Yeah, so the State Bar Association, the one that we were talking about earlier, also does what they call a call for all. They usually do it 2 or 3 times a year, but they get volunteer attorneys who come in and will spend the entire day answering phone calls. You can call in on any issue. They'll match you up with an attorney who can kind of answer questions for you, who can address concerns either substantively about the underlying material of the case or procedurally about the process by which you go through. The other avenues that are available, a couple other resources, there's the Legal Support Center in Wake County, and Mecklenburg County has a legal support center as well. Not exactly, I can't quite remember the title of their center, but they provide a lot of unbundled services and a lot of templates and a lot of guides that are available for individuals who can't hire attorneys. And then there's an organization called Legal Hand, which is a call center that does predominantly, if not exclusively, family law issues, that is available to provide kind of guidance and answer questions on a more regular basis that can be reached out to, not just the kind of call for all, which is a couple big promoted days a year.
Yeah. And so when Richard talks about the legal support centers, this is somewhat new actually, but they actually have a section of the courthouse that you can go to, and they have staff and volunteer attorneys who are present, and they help you fill out the proper paperwork that you need to get filed to kind of move your case in the right direction. And you can go, and it's absolutely a free service. They make photocopies for you. They give you the forms that you need. They will file things for you to make sure that you're doing things properly. Your courthouse may not have that available yet, but it's worth just going down there, going through security, walking through to the clerk's office and just asking, like, do you have a support center here? And many times the clerks in your courthouse may just assist you. They're very, very helpful, very kind and considerate people. So just going into your local courthouse and asking for help, a lot of times you can just get free help by doing that. I'll tell a very quick story. I know of a lady who, she has a property distribution case. She's trying to get her house sold, and she can't move forward because she's not filed the proper paperwork. There are particular forms that have to be completed. And so just going down to the local courthouse and finding out what forms need to be completed and making sure those forms get completed and filed can help you in getting your case, moving your case forward. Another thing I'll say too is meeting with an attorney. Make sure that you know your budget, right? If you're really struggling financially, you can't go to an attorney that's going to charge $500 an hour. You're going to run out of money just like that, right? A $500 an hour attorney just for 4 hours of work, which me and Richard can attest to the fact that that's nothing, right? That's $2,000. You need to find someone who's going to be in your range, maybe $150, maybe $200 an hour. And that might mean that you've got to find somebody who's maybe younger, just graduated from law school, or has a little less experience. And I know many women are nervous about that because they don't think that they're going to have enough experience or they're going to be strong enough to go up against a really abusive person. But I think Richard can tell you with his students, would you say that you've got some students who've got some zeal and some chutzpah and can go up against some of those really abusive guys?
Yeah, no, certainly we have students that come in that are very passionate, that are very direct, that are very gung-ho, and many of whom come in with their own personal history of being involved in violent relationships and can relate and understand. And the other thing that I will echo off and dovetail onto what Tiffany was kind of talking about is also keep in mind when you're retaining an attorney and that you're working with counsel, the retainer amount that you pay initially will not be the total cost of your case. The retainer is kind of a prepayment. It's a partial payment. So when you're meeting with an attorney, if they tell you, it's a $10,000 retainer, if it's a $30,000 retainer, if it's a $5,000 retainer, be aware that that won't be the last payment you have to make, and keep that in mind of when you might think that, well, I can scrape together everything I have to retain this attorney with this retainer. Know that that's not going to guarantee you representation through the end of your case. So you may not want to use every dime that you have for the initial retainer, because then you may end up in a situation where a month before trial, you run out of money and the retainer's gone, and now you're representing yourself at that end of the case.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. And what I will say too is, when I was a new attorney, I would have many people come in during their initial consultations and kind of grill me on my level of experience. How long have you been doing this? How many cases have you tried? And really were hesitant to retain me because I was new. And I was a powerhouse attorney, right? The minute I graduated from law school, because I was a survivor of domestic violence. So I understood abuse. Like I could see it. I could smell it. As soon as I'd walk through the room, I understood abusive behavior. And so that made me a very successful attorney, even though I was younger and less experienced. But I still had more experience with abuse, and I still had a tougher demeanor than many of the attorneys that were $500 an hour and had been practicing for 20 years. So don't let someone who has less experience dissuade you from hiring them if they're within your budget and you feel like you have a good rapport with them, right? If you have confidence in them and they're within your budget, I would probably give them a chance. That being said, if you go in, they don't understand abuse, they're not speaking your language, you don't feel like they're a good fit, that you might need to move on and go to somebody else. We just have a few more minutes left, but I do want to talk about domestic violence organizations, right? Your local domestic violence advocacy center, national domestic violence organizations, nonprofits, reach out to them as well, right? They have advocates that you can network with, who will come to court with you, that may be able to help you with forms, filling out a protective order. There might be volunteer attorneys that are working with them that they can help provide you with some legal advice. And they may have referrals for domestic violence attorneys who will provide pro bono services, or maybe discounted rates. So if they get a referral from this DV agency, this attorney may discount their rate for you, or they may offer free consultations for DV victims. So you absolutely want to be contacting your local domestic violence organizations, or even your national domestic violence organizations. And Richard, can you talk a little bit about Call to Peace Ministries and what Call to Peace does in particular?
So this gets back to one of the discussions we had right before Elysia had to log off and leave. But Call to Peace Ministries is an international nonprofit organization that's actually based in North Carolina that really does a lot of their work with advocating for education of pastors and churches so that they are more trauma informed and domestic violence aware, so that they don't have these situations where pastors are approaching situations solely to keep families intact. And they provide a lot of advocacy and other resources to victims of domestic violence as they journey from victim to survivor in their personal journey.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And so Call to Peace also offers advocates, and they are specifically geared to women of faith. So if you're struggling with that as a woman of faith, leaving an abusive marriage, and there's spirituality issues that you're really struggling with, that's an organization that can really help you with those issues, because God hates oppression, right? And he loves you. And he doesn't want you to be in that type of oppressive environment. So would highly encourage you to reach out to Call to Peace Ministries. There are many, many organizations that are out there nationally. I had put in the chat womenslaw.org. If you go there, you can click on every single state and all of the United States territories as well. And they will provide you with legal resources, domestic violence organizations, the statutes on custody and domestic violence, forms, so many resources on things that you need, and everything is completely free. And Ma had a question about what questions can we ask to determine an attorney's level of expertise with domestic abuse. I'm going to respond to that in the chat. But I would ask how they're going to focus on abuse in your custody or alimony case. And I would actually just talk about the abuse in general and see how they respond. Will they engage with you in a discussion about domestic abuse? Or do they shy away from it? Like, do they not want to talk about it? Do they say that's not going to be a factor in your case? We're not going to talk about that. Or they seem hesitant or nervous to talk about domestic violence? Or are they willing to engage with you and they seem well-versed in the subject, right? And they seem sympathetic and compassionate, empathetic to what you're going through. You want to feel like you have a very good connection with whomever is going to represent you. And I'm sure that when you're in a meeting with an attorney, you're going to feel that connection or you're not, right? They're going to give you the creeps, like saying things like, well, why don't you just give him 50-50 custody? Or it's not abuse because he didn't hit you, right? Discounting the behavior.
And I would echo a lot of what Tiffany just said, that if they ever discount the abuse or don't understand the dynamics of abuse, that certainly is a major red flag. The one caveat I will say to what she kind of talked about is there are certain areas of divorce law under North Carolina and in many other states, for instance, child support and equitable distribution, the division of property, where unfortunately the law doesn't allow a lot of leeway in allowing domestic violence to be a factor in those kind of cases. So if you're going to an attorney, you've already got custody resolved, but you now need child support, do understand that the domestic violence and the abuse will not be as big a part or maybe even any part of the case. North Carolina law doesn't allow additional child support to be paid because of the circumstances of the separation. It's governed by a pretty strict calculator. So what attorneys are going to want to talk to you about is the stuff that goes into that calculator, the finances and the numbers and the expenses. So just be aware when you are kind of interviewing your attorney, and remember that a consultation is as much you interviewing them as them interviewing you. But knowing that depending on what you're there to ask for, they may want to talk less about the abuse because it's not as pointed as the other areas like custody, where it's a huge factor.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. And we are out of time. So to everyone watching, you are not powerless, right? There are people and programs ready to stand beside you. There are attorneys who are survivors, who are also victims of domestic violence and are ready to fight hard for you. So whether it's a law school clinic, whether it's legal aid, whether it's our own Live Free Legal coaching community, you deserve safety, support, and justice. And so thank you so much, Richard, for joining us today. Thank you for your heart and your advocacy for the community and the underserved. I appreciate you being here. To everyone watching, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so more women can find this resource. And if you'd like to learn more about Live Free Legal's coaching programs and Live Free Legal's legal prep tools, so that's another affordable way that you can help advocate for yourself. You can join an Empower Her membership group. It's only $35 a year. And our legal coaching program is $35 a week. That can really help equip you with legal tools that you need to be successful. We're giving away 2 free Live Free Legal Empower Her memberships. Share this video with someone who needs it. Give us a thumbs up and put hashtag Live Free Legal in your post to be entered to win. We will see you Tuesday next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another empowering Domestic Violence Awareness Month broadcast. We do a webcast every Tuesday at 7. I will be talking about what is physical abuse from the perspective of an attorney, maybe things you've not thought about. So stay safe, stay strong, and remember, you were never alone. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Oh, Richard's not there anymore.